For the last 2 years, Emma has been working as a homelessness and housing support worker. She works full-time, but right now, money is tight.
I'm barely surviving. Can't pay my bills. I can't feed myself some days. I can't put fuel in my car to actually go and do the job that is supposed to be helping other people.
After paying her monthly bills, Emma is left with just £135. Out of this, she has to buy food for her and her child, as well as fuel to enable her to do her job.
Sometimes I'll go to a petrol station where I know they'll only debit £1, and I will go into an unauthorised overdraft once that money's cleared, just so I can get to work, because that's how bad it is.
You look after the most vulnerable in society. Do you now yourself feel vulnerable?
Yes, absolutely. It's just so hard to then go home and sit there and evaluate your life and think, how did I get here when I'm supposed to be helping others, and now I'm the one that needs help?
Emma says she's doing extra shifts just to put food on the table, but it's taking its toll.
It's horrendous, if I'm honest. The mental well-being of my colleagues is, you can see the strain is on them. That's all we kind of talk about when we're together is, you know, how am I going to pay my bills? How am I going to get food? Am I going to have to go and borrow off friends and family just to feed my kids?
In a sector already stretched, Emma says she and many of her colleagues are being forced to consider whether they can continue.
The options is probably to leave my job and do a job I hate just to get enough money to pay my bills. And it shouldn't come to that. You know, if you're going to move on, you should be going to a job that you really want to do, not because you want to survive.
But right now, survival is the reality of life for Emma and many others working within the support sector. Kate Lewis, ITV News.
Well, I'm joined now by the director of Cymorth Cymru, Katie Dalton. Thanks for coming in. This report paints a fairly bleak picture for the sector. Do you think people working in homelessness and housing are disproportionately affected?
I think so. I think many people are suffering with the cost of living at the moment, but this sector almost operates under the radar. People know what health services are and social care because many family members use those services. Most people are lucky enough to never need a homelessness service. So a lot of these workers do incredibly complex, important jobs, but don't get that recognition and reward. And the reality is that they've not had a pay increase for over a decade in many cases. And we've seen what has happened with inflation over the years. And so they're simply not able to cope with the wage that they're paid compared to the cost of living.
And what sort of impact is that having on their mental health?
They're really struggling. I've worked in this sort of sector for about 11 years and I've never known morale to be so low. And these are people who love what they do. They care passionately about going to work and supporting people. And they're really on their knees at the moment. As we heard there from the clip, so many workers are really struggling to put food on the table. They're skipping meals. They're having to take on extra shifts or other jobs. And many are getting into debt as a result.
And we saw there in the film that they're doing absolutely vital work that's needed, but possibly considering leaving the sector.
I know, and that's heartbreaking. I've recently spoken to frontline workers who have worked in this sector for 20 or 30 years. They're so committed to their jobs and the work that they do. But for the first time, they're really thinking about leaving because they can't afford to put food on the table. And we'll be losing really experienced staff who work with people who have had such complex trauma that these skills and expertise are absolutely vital. And, you know, we're either going to lose people from the sector or we're going to force people into further poverty.
So what needs to happen to improve the situation for support workers then?
Well, we're calling on the Welsh Government to increase the housing support grant in the next Welsh budget because that will enable these staff to have a pay rise. We're also calling on the UK Government to take further action on energy costs. The announcement 2 weeks ago is simply not enough. And we're also asking the UK Government to increase the mileage allowance rates because that's not increased for about 11 years. And so many of these workers have to drive to do their jobs and it's putting them out of pocket.
OK, Katie Dalton, we'll have to leave it there. Thank you very much indeed.